Yeah, I brought Mark to Washington. He in fact wrote me a letter. He was a Texas Instruments lawyer, young lawyer at the time. So I brought him into the Action Agency, and he worked with Jim Burnley under Jim Burnley, who was head of Vista, where all that.
I wanted to go in kind of a separate direction.
Right.
We know that Greg Abbott is using the same campaign manager that Dewars is using.
Right.
We also know, for those of us that listen to us who go on the radio, and I'm one of them, he was a big supporter of Ted Cruz, and had Ted Cruz on his show numerous times. Have you reached, and we also know that if you're against crony capitalism, you're probably not going to get a whole lot of big fat donors coming out.
Right.
So you're going to be relying on one of these little donors. Why, have you reached out to Mark Levin?
No,
See if you can get that ready, get on that radio program?
Larry Davenport, who is on Mark's board, is a very good friend of mine as well, and I know he's talking. Mark mentions me from time to time on his show, so hopefully we'll see what happens, but I hope that he will.
Are you trying to get on there?
Well, we're gonna see, try to get on if we can.
Okay.
He's mentioned me positively a number of times because, I put the program together to defund the left and the elvis.
Well, I don't know if he was a determining factor in Cruz's victory, but I don't think it hurt.
No.
Another quick question for you. Redirecting money towards the border.
Right.
We saw what happened in Arizona. They got smacked down pretty hard for trying to enforce their own border. How would you perceive it would be any different with you as governor if you tried the same?
Well, you've just got to, for example, you've got to look at all of the legal aspects and figure out how to put it together in the right way. And there's I don't want to quote his name, but a former U.S. attorney is very knowledgeable on that. It is taking a look at, what can we do from a legal perspective. There's a lot you can do from a legal perspective that we're not doing now. It's our border, and we can secure it. I'm one who believes in trying to be proactive and laying something out. For example, had I been governor and at a time when we had George W. Bush a Texan in the White House, I would have gone to Washington and said, give us a waiver on Medicaid so we can handle that issue on our own, just like you gave a waiver to Rhode Island, which is a Democratic state. Had I been Attorney General Greg Abbott or Governor Perry at the time, 2005 and 2006, when the Republicans controlled the White House and the Senate and the House, I would have gone to Washington to say, don't put Texas and a few other states under the Voting Rights Act, which is going to be controlled by liberals, bureaucrats in the Department of Justice, even under Republican administrations. Don't put us under the Voting Rights Act for another 25 years. We wouldn't be in all this mess and litigation we're in today. And I think there are ways to go about it that, you can't be afraid to stand up, but you want to put the pieces together in the right way.
If you were governor,
yes,
can you foresee a circumstance where you would allow the Obamacare exchanges in this state?
No, I think we do our own. I think we put our own program together in the state. I just think, I think there are ways to work around, to address the issue, but not allow them to have federal control over our health care. There's, in fact, one of the things that I believe in, if you're going to be against something, and Obamacare is a bloody disaster, what's your alternative? In fact, I tried to talk to Pete Sessions and some others when this whole issue came up. And I said, look, and I recommend those of you interested in healthcare policy look at a book called Cured by Stephen Hyde, which lays out a market-driven, consumer-driven, free market approach with a safety net. Lay out an alternative. You don't like what's happening here, what are you going to do about it? And I think we do have a responsibility to address the health policy concerns, but I think we can do it working around the Obama administration. I'm glad to see the governor today, for the first time, came out with what I've been proposing for a long time, and Rick Perry said, let's set up a system to go to HHS and say we're going to take the Medicaid money, but we're going to do it without the strings attached and treat it as a block grant. That's what I thought we should have done legislatively. And if they don't like it, the interesting thing is, in that Supreme Court unfortunate decision in which they upheld Obamacare, there's language in that decision which suggests that the Obama administration or federal government cannot demand that you comply with all of their rules and regulations. I would have, as governor, gotten pushed to get legislation through saying that we'll take the money, the Medicaid money, but we'll take it as a block grant. They then turn us down, and then you walk over into U.S. District Court with a fine constitutional lawyer, and you challenge it on 10th Amendment grounds. And I think you win that case.
Tell me what the other
Yes.
Could you speak to so-called free trade agreements, specifically the last one, big one, I guess, NAFTA, and what do you think that did for Texas? Or against?
Yeah, I'm for change of a complete change of our tax policy. I'm not, free trade sounds great theoretically, but the reality is we're at, on average, a 17% disadvantage with our trading competitors, because virtually every nation in the world, including Mexico, by the way, has what's called a border-adjusted consumption tax. So that when a U.S. product is shipped to Germany, as an example, you're hit at the border with a 19% border-adjusted consumption tax. You can't be competitive. China, 17%, I think. Mexico, 15%. It's across the board. Average at 17%. What I would do, and now this is not something you can do as governor, but I think that we ought to adopt the policy. My goal is, I'm more worried about jobs in the U.S., rebuilding our manufacturing base, and not all this globalism and all this, business of the Wall Street guys running our economic system, which they do, because you've got a tax system that rewards debt because debt is deductible, while punitively taxing capital investment, employment, and savings. So to me, what I would do is totally eliminate that and replace it with the 35% corporate income tax, the 7.65 employer portion of the payroll tax, and replace it with a revenue-neutral border-adjusted consumption tax. So goods and services coming into the U.S. are taxed. All exports or companies exporting get a tax credit against their business consumption tax at 8 to 9%. That would be revenue neutral, and you level the playing field with our trading competitors. I'm more worried about jobs in America, and anything that hinders that, I'm not a fan of. Yes.
First of all, it just says so much about you that you come just to talk to a small group, that your commitment to Texas breaks my heart. Thank you. What's going to happen, and it's going to come up, and by the way, I was kind of disappointed that you had secured the borders number 5 on here, but what's going to happen?
Well, that's at the base. You start 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's the
Right, but anyway, what's going to happen when it comes up and it so insults Hispanic people who take it as an insult because we want to secure our border?
No.
So
Well,
go ahead.
my wife of 39 years is Mexican American. I work with the Mexican American community in the legislature on passing House Bill 5, which provides for more vocational technical education. We had strong support there. Look, the Hispanic community has a strong veteran presence, military, pro-life, pro-family, good work ethic. Don't get into this trap of everything being, I'm not for amnesty, and don't get into the trap of letting them define the debate on reaching out to the Hispanic community. Challenge them.
Ignore it, though. It's
I know, but I'm just saying,
up.
of course, but I'm just not for amnesty. And let me tell you, a lot of the Mexican American community, particularly in the Valley, where there are jobs that they lose jobs to people who are here illegally, it's not a heavy percent in favor of unlimited immigration. And I think I don't see that as a problem. You've got to secure the border. And people down there are concerned about it. And all of the dumping that goes on in terms of county costs for emergency health care and all of this, I mean, it's a huge problem. So I just think you don't let the left define everything as over immigration policy. I spoke to some Hispanics earlier today, and they said, look, I'm not for amnesty. But a pathway to jobs is what I'm talking about. And the jobs for people who are illegally in this, who are in this country, who are citizens or legally in this country. And guess what? I just spoke to, a pretty large audience there were over 100 kids who got industry certified credentials at Craft Training Center in Corpus Christi. And I was there for the commencement exercise. It was great to see these young people walking across the stage and get an industry certified credential and going into the oil field as a welder starting at $1,500 a week. That's not too shabby.
I like doing it.
Yeah. But let me tell you, they're overwhelmingly Hispanic, but we just reach out with that policy of a hand up, not a hand down. And I was able to work with a lot of the Hispanic legislators. And by the way, Eddie Lucio is a senator who is a Democrat. But Senator Eddie Lucio gave a very heartfelt speech on behalf of pro-life with all that debate. And he was on the opposite side of Wendy Davis. And I'll tell you, you nominate me as governor, and I'm going to be on the phone to the Eddie Lucios of the world, who's a good friend of mine. He happens to be a Democrat, but we work together on a lot of things. But he's Catholic pro-life. So you've got to reach out on areas where there's common agreement. And by and large, the Hispanic community is conservative. It's not liberal. You've got a lot of liberal representatives that have gotten themselves in place because of that San Antonio crowd and others who are pushing their leftist candidates. But I tell you, even in San Antonio, and again, this is a while back, but Frank Tejeda, who was a Vietnam veteran, a state senator, pro-life, Catholic Democrat. There are a whole bunch of Tejano Democrats in San Antonio. And with the right approach and the right leadership, we can bring them over. They're not comfortable with the Castro crowd. They're out of tune with all this same-sex marriage and pro-abortion push and all this left-wing politics. This doesn't reflect the Hispanic community. But the problem is they've been embedded and worked at it so hard. And you've got to empower some of our Hispanic conservatives, and there are a number of them in San Antonio, but they don't get the kind of support they need. So I think we can do a lot better in the Hispanic community than what Mitt Romney did last time. And I feel that I will be able to get very strong support in that community. Yes.
What do you think about term limits?
I am all for them. My opponent's against them. I believe 2 4-year terms for statewide elected officials is sufficient. I did support Senator Eltive's bill to do that, which passed the Senate. It would have been submitted to the voters, except it died. It was killed in the House. I support term limits. I would support 2 4-year terms for state elected officials and 12 years for congressmen and full legislators.
The thing that bothers me as a property owner, it just galls me each year. I give away a savings account to the schools here, and then for them to teach uber leftist, plans and stuff. But and I want to remind everybody, the school district here has set a vote for early November to raise the taxes again. So everyone, if you're a PISD property taxpayer, you need to keep that in mind. But what could you do to offset some of the property taxes? I mean, 2/3 of my property taxes go to just the school district. It's outrageous.
And not only that, but a lot of your school property taxes go to other districts elsewhere in Texas. And that would be eliminated under my proposed effort to get rid of the Robin Hood School Financing Scheme. So that would substantially lower your property taxes here in Plain. That's one. Secondly, I believe the caps should be lower. I chaired the Governor's Commission on Appraisal Reform. Unfortunately, nothing that we pushed got passed. But that would take the cap on homestead property from 10% down to 5%, and put a cap of 10% on all other property. But property taxes are too high in Texas, and we've got to address that. And the first thing to do is get rid of that $1.1 billion Robin Hood School scheme, which takes local property taxes and shifts them elsewhere, replace it with a different, revenue neutral approach to get the money to property poor districts.
They make it a miserable proposition to own property because it's
Right.
a savings account a year, and we pay it, we're just raising
Well,
them or savings.
And the other problem too, you take, you know, people who are living on a fixed income, and even with some of the senior benefits, or maybe they're not 65 yet, don't get those benefits, and they don't, you know, or suddenly they've lost their job, and gosh, the property taxes are so high, they wind up having to sell their home. That's particularly the case when somebody goes through a divorce, and all of a sudden they've got to sell their home if they're in an area where you're negatively impacted by robbing or bad here. And that's just an unfair and inequitable system. And it's the other, I mean, you know, they say, oh, well, it's rich people. Well, what happens if you happen to be a poor person living in a property-rich district? And that's you know, I mean, you're double taxed. It's very unfair. Now, the other thing, the reason I think we can get something done, I was talking with the South Texas superintendent not too long ago, and he was superintendent of what once was, not too long ago, a property poor district. Then they have the Eagle Ford Shale found oil in that district, and all of a sudden it's property rich. And guess what? His perspective is a little different. So you got people, this is the hard part. It's easy to get out and call press conferences and say you're this or you're taking on Obama, but the hard part is getting in and doing the dirty work to get some of these things done. But there's a coalition that I think is easily put together, and I visited with a number of the property poor district superintendents, and they're comfortable as long as they, you know, as long as they know that, because in some of those areas they don't have revenue sources, so I can see their concern. But there are ways to do this that aren't that complicated to get their support and take some of that relief off of people. Yes.
I'm the county commissioner here in Collin County, and everybody wants to talk about Obamacare and the impacts of Obamacare. But in 2010, our most Republican state legislature adopted a Medicaid waiver. And our Medicaid policy in Texas is now being dictated to us by the Obama administration. That's already happening to us. And as a result, I mean, what that did for the state legislature is they've effectively pushed down the cost of Medicaid to your local government. And for those of us who resist that, now there's talk about requiring us to set aside a certain amount of our budget to go back to Austin to be distributed much the same way schools.
Another Robin
Hood program.
Okay, let me.
And the problem is all the infrastructure is now getting changed to work on this type of program. And how do you unwind all of that?
Here's what now. Distinguish between, I know what you're talking about, that's not what I was talking about on the Medicaid waiver. What I was talking about is getting a waiver from the federal government.
That's what we have. We have 1115 waiver.
No, I'm talking about the state. The state did not apply for a waiver.
They did, and it was adopted.
No.
We're operating under it currently.
No, what that means, what a waiver under Medicaid means is you get the money from the feds for it, that you are entitled in the state of Texas to allocate those resources as you see fit. Rhode Island got that waiver. Texas did not. Texas should have tried to get it. It's not what you're talking. You're talking about something different. It's not the same. And I understand the problem.
We have the same waiver that California has.
No, but it's not. It is not a waiver which allows the state of Texas.
Exactly. It does not allow us to use it in the way that we see fit. It's being dictated.
That's by the Obama administration. And what I'm saying, what I've advocated, what should have been done when we had a Republican in the White House, get a waiver then, which wasn't done. Rhode Island got one, we didn't. But we should have had legislation passed this session which says we'll take the money that we're entitled to, because it's our money that's gone up there, but we'll determine how to spend it in Texas. We did not pass that legislation this time. Only today has Rick Perry come out, I saw it in the Texas Tribune, calling on doing it. Where you get, the horses are out of the barn. And you got all these problems at the county level. I visited with your county judge about some of these problems. I understand it, but I'm saying that I think there's a case for calling a special session and getting it done quickly. Because I think we've got a good challenge. It might take a while. But no, it's a huge problem. And the governor's got to come in and get everybody together. What do we do with this god-awful mess? You know there's a train wreck coming. You're already feeling the effects of it. How do we best do it without losing our state sovereignty? Yes.
Would you support open carry in Texas?
Yes.
On the Medicare-Medicaid issue, so much of that ends up in state hands. And there is no question, there is a huge amount of fraud and abuse. An example which came up locally and stuff like this, overly much, but is that in terms of orthodontics, medically necessary orthodontics, over half of all the ones in the nation are done in state Texas. I don't think our kids' teeth are that much worse than any other states. The problem is that we end up talking about this and it never gets addressed because there are people like the TMA and other medical outfits that are made very nervous about discussion of fraud because they know there is enough out there that a lot of their members are going to get dinged. So how do we go about actually because we're talking budgetary amounts of tens of billions of dollars that could be recovered or essentially not spent.
Well, and you also have a food stamp as well.
Well, yeah.
We cannot control the food stamps, the bartering.
Yeah, that we can't, but we have some control of Medicare.
No, but we can, on Medicare and Medicaid, you're absolutely right. And it's federal funds, but just because it's federal funds, we should address it here in Texas. There needs to
We
be
do a minute.
a major fraud, anti-fraud prevention unit put in place. Also, the technology's out there. You can see certain things. You can identify things early on. And again, that is an important area that we've neglected, that has been neglected in the state. The problem is it's not a policy-driven operation in Austin. It's sort of like, don't rock the boat and just sort of let things go on because you start rocking the boat and that creates issues and controversy and we don't want that. But you got to rock the boat. And I will address that issue. Yes.
You mentioned the 10th Amendment, and I'm sure as governor of Texas, that'll be your favorite part of the U.S. Constitution. Given for obvious reasons, because that reserves to the state all rights not enumerated to the federal government. Given that our federal government is trotting on our rights, the Second Amendment rights, and the Fourth and the Fifth, would you be supportive of state legislation that stands up to unconstitutional federal laws?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, you have to, the Second Amendment is a clear example. I think a number of states have addressed that issue, Missouri most recently. And there are 10th Amendment issues out there. There are ways you can, address that issue. Again, you want to proceed appropriately, but I'm fortunate to have a professor at Georgetown University, just died about a month ago, the late George Carey, and his Bible was the Federalist Papers of the American Constitution. And George is, as you say, he was a great believer of separation of powers, checks and balances, and the principle of federalism, which is the forgotten amendment, the 10th Amendment to the Constitution, power of none, expressly delegated to the federal government, resorted to the states and the people respect. We also have to look at, we were talking a little bit earlier about what happened to some of the Tea Party people in Houston. Is there an opportunity or a situation where you might have an ombudsman if the federal government overreaches? You've got small businesses or individuals that are treated inappropriately by an oppressive federal government. Should you provide some legal representation for them? You've got to pick and choose the right cases at the beginning. But again, that's something proactively we can do. I was with a lawyer the other day who had a case that almost got to the Supreme Court on the constitutionality of the Endangered Species Act. And you've just got to, there are talented people out there, you've just got to be proactive rather than, get up. It's easy to have a press conference and say, this is, beat your breast, this is what I'm doing. It's how you stay, you've got to beat the left, you've got to stay a step ahead of them, you've got to outsmart them, outwork them. And we're not doing that.
One other quick question.
Last question.
I wanted to second what you said because my wife is Mexican American. She's a Latina. She's uber, I mean, she's ultra conservative. And she gets disgusted when she hears liberal Anglos tell her, you know, like the Bryant, whatever, Ross, whatever his name is, these anchors on NBC and all that, tell her as a Latina what she thinks, that she's for is flooding the country's wide open borders. So
No.
she feels like your wife. But I was going to ask, is there a way of building a coalition among like-minded states, you know, to help out Ted Cruz and say, you know, we agree with this. This Obamacare thing is a disaster. We are not going to send another penny to Washington, D.C. until this thing gets emasculated or whatever, and have 15 or 20 states, because Texas is a donor state, right? I mean, we send more money to Washington than we ever get back. Is there a way you can do that and just withhold money from Washington, D.C. and say, this is going to have to occur?
The state doesn't control that. I mean, that's control on the, you know, the taxes. I mean, that's done. You'd have to look at it, but I don't think that.
Yes.
Yeah.
I guess the point about cooperating with other states, the compact seems to be underutilized by the states with common interests. I just don't know why that happens. It used to be used a lot less in the universities for the tuition stuff, but they don't seem to be using the compact, the state compact as much as they once did. That's one of the things.
Well, that's a good point. The other issue, you know, we have a huge water problem in Texas, an incredible problem. I worry about the politicalization of the new water board and centralization of power. 2 of the 3 people appointed by the governor have no experience in water. But why can't you, for example, Oklahoma and Louisiana, both neighboring states, Republican governors, they have an abundance of water, we've got a shortage of water. Isn't there a compact or a deal that could be made with them? It could be a win-win situation. For whatever reason, we haven't explored, we should explore. And there are a whole bunch of other areas where compacts could be put in place with like-minded people. And you've got Louisiana, Oklahoma, New Mexico now, Republican government. There are a number of areas where we can work together. All right, thank you very much.